Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. Sure. Allowing remote connections to a MariaDB server involves several steps, including configuring the database server, modifying firewall settings, and ensuring proper authentication. Below is a detailed tutorial on how to achieve this. Step 1. Install MariaDB. If you haven't already installed MariaDB, you can do so using the following commands based on your operating system. For Ubuntu/Debian: bash sudo apt update, sudo apt install mariadb-server. For centos/rhel: bash sudo yum install mariadb-server. Step 2. Configure MariaDB to allow remote connections. 1. Edit the MariaDB configuration file. Open the MariaDB configuration file in your preferred text editor. The file is usually located at /etc/mysql/mariadb.conf.d/50server.cnf on Debian-based systems or /etc/my.cnf on Red Hat-based systems. Bash sudo nano /etc/mariadb.conf.d/50server.cnf. Look for the line that starts with bind address. By default, it's often set to 127.0.0.1. Change it to 0.0.0.0.0 to allow connections from any IP address. Plain text. Bind address equals 0.0.0.0.0. To restart MariaDB service. After making changes to the configuration file, restart the MariaDB service to apply the changes. Bash sudo systemctl restart mariadb. Step 3. Create a remote user. 1. Log into MariaDB. Use the following command to log in to the MariaDB server as the root user. Bash sudo mariadb root p. 2. Create a new user and grant permissions. To create a new user that will connect from a remote IP address, execute the following SQL commands. Replace nuuser, password, and remote_IP with your desired username, password, and the IP address of the remote machine. SQL. Create user nuuser at remote_IP identified by password. Grant all privileges onto nuuser at remote_IP with grant option. Flush privileges. If you want to allow connections from any IP address, you can use % as a wildcard. SQL. Create user nuuser at % identified by password. Grant all privileges onto nuuser at % with grant option. Flush privileges. Step 4. Configure firewall. If you have a firewall running, you need to allow traffic on the MariaDB port. Default is 3306. For UFW, on Ubuntu/Debian. Bash sudo ufu allow 3306/TCP. For firewalled, on centos/rhel. Bash sudo firewall cmd permanent add port equals 3306/TCP. Sudo firewall cmd reload. Step 5. Test remote connection. On the remote machine, you can test the connection using the following command. Bash mysql unuuser ph mariadb-server IP. Replace mariadb-server IP with the actual IP address of your MariaDB server. You will be prompted to enter the password for nuuser. Step 6. Security considerations. 1. Use strong passwords. Ensure that the passwords you use for database users are strong. 2. Limit IP addresses. Instead of allowing connections from any IP, limit access to specific IP addresses whenever possible. 3. Use SSL. If you're transmitting sensitive data, consider setting up SSL/TLS for your MariaDB connections. For regularly update, keep your MariaDB server updated to benefit from the latest security patches. Conclusion. That's it. You've successfully configured your MariaDB server to allow remote connections. Make sure to follow security best practices to protect your database from unauthorized access. If you have any questions or need further assistance, feel free to ask. Enabling remote connections to a MariaDB server involves configuring both the database server and the firewall settings on the server. Below is a step-by-step tutorial to help you achieve this. Step 1. Install MariaDB. If you haven't already installed MariaDB, you can do so using the package manager for your operating system. For example, on Ubuntu, you would run bash sudo apt update sudo apt install mariadb-server. Step 2. Secure the installation. After installing MariaDB, it's good practice to run the security script to set a root password, remove anonymous users, and disable root login remotely. Bash sudo mysql_secure_ installation. Follow the prompts to configure your installation securely. Step 3. Configure MariaDB to allow remote connections. 1. Edit the configuration file ***. Open the MariaDB configuration file, usually located at /etc/mysql/mariadb.conf.d/50server.cnf or /etc/my.cnf. Bash sudo nano /etc/mysql/mariadb.conf.d/50server.cnf. 2. Bind address ***. Look for the line that says ini bind address equals 127.0.0.1. Change it to either ini bind address equals 0.0.0.0. This allows MariaDB to listen on all interfaces, or you can specify a particular IP address to restrict access to only certain IPs. 3. Save and exit ***. Save your changes and exit the editor. In Nano, press Ctrl+X, then Y, and enter. Step 4. Create a user for remote access. 1. Log into MariaDB***. Log into your MariaDB server using the root user or any other administrative account. Bash sudo mysql uroot. 2. Create a user ***. Run the following command to create a new user and grant the necessary privileges. Replace username, password, and remote_IP_address with your desired username, password, and the IP address of the remote machine that will connect to MariaDB. Use % as the host if you want to allow connections from any IP. SQL. Create user username at remote_IP_address identified by password. Grant all privileges onto username at remote_IP_address with grant option. Flush privileges. Example. SQL. Create user remote_user at % identified by secure password. Grant all privileges onto remote_user at % with grant option. Flush privileges. 3. Exit MariaDB ***. SQL. Exit. Step 5. Configure firewall. If you have a firewall running, like UFO on Ubuntu, you need to allow incoming connections on the default MariaDB port, 3306. 1. Allow port 3306 ***. Bash sudo UFO allow 3306/TCP. 2. Enable UFW, if it is not already enabled. Bash sudo UFO enable. 3. Check UFW status ***. Bash sudo UFO status. Step 6. Restart MariaDB service. After making all the changes, Restart the MariaDB service to apply the configuration. Bash sudo systemcll restart mariadb. Step 7, Testing remote connection. From a remote machine, you can test the connection using the following command. Bash mysql username /your_server_ip. Replace username with the username you created and /your_server_ip with the IP address of the MariaDB server. Conclusion: you have now configured your MariaDB server to accept remote connections. Make sure to follow best security practices, such as using strong passwords, limiting access to specific IP addresses, and regularly updating your server.